Maya stood at the edge of the small airstrip, clutching her backpack tightly. The wind whipped around her, carrying with it the faint scent of pine trees and damp earth. She had been traveling for hours, first a flight from the city where she worked, then a long drive through winding country roads. Her heart felt heavy, like a stone sinking into an endless ocean. It wasn't supposed to end this way. Her mother, Eleanor, was supposed to be there waiting for her when she came home next month, just as she always had been. Eleanor was more than just Maya's mom. She was her best friend, her confidant, the person who had taught her how to face life's toughest moments. They had weathered so much together. The loss of Maya's father years ago, financial struggles, and even quiet arguments that sometimes left them both feeling hurt. But no matter what happened, they always found their way back to each other. Eleanor was the glue that held everything together, the steady presence in Maya's chaotic world. Now that presence was gone. The call had come late at night, jolting Maya awake from a restless sleep. A nurse's calm but detached voice explained that Eleanor had undergone emergency surgery after complications arose during a routine procedure. "I'm sorry," the woman had said, her tone flat, almost rehearsed. "She didn't make it." Those 3 words hit Maya like a freight train. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the floor. She sat there in stunned silence, staring at the wall until dawn broke outside her window. Now standing on the tarmac of the tiny airport near her hometown, Maya tried to prepare herself for what lay ahead. Saying goodbye to someone you loved wasn't supposed to feel this surreal. Everything about the trip felt wrong. The cold bite of the air, the eerie quietness of the place, the gnawing sense of unease growing in her stomach. She hadn't seen her mother in months, not since Christmas, and now she wouldn't get another chance to hug her, to hear her laugh, or to tell her how much she meant to her. A black sedan pulled up beside her, and out stepped Mr. Harris, the local funeral director. He was a tall man with thinning gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Maya remembered him vaguely from her childhood. He'd always been polite whenever she accompanied her mother to town events. Today, though, his expression was somber, weighed down by the gravity of the task before him. "Miss Carter," he said softly, offering her a gentle nod. "I'm very sorry for your loss." Maya forced herself to smile, though it felt brittle and unnatural. "Thank you for helping me with everything," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. She climbed into the car, gripping the locket around her neck, a gift from Eleanor on her 18th birthday. Inside it was a picture of the 2 of them smiling brightly, arms wrapped around each other. It was one of her most treasured possessions, and today it felt like the only thing keeping her grounded. The drive to the funeral home was short but agonizingly slow. Maya stared out the window, watching familiar landmarks pass by. The old bookstore where she used to hide as a child, the park where she and her mother would walk their dog, the little cafe that served the best apple pie in town. Memories flooded, back with every turn of the wheel, making her chest ache even more. She wanted to scream, to cry, to do anything to release the storm brewing inside her. But instead, she stayed silent, focusing on the rhythmic hum of the tires against the pavement. When they arrived at the funeral home, Maya hesitated before stepping out of the car. The building looked exactly as she remembered it, a modest brick structure with white shutters and a neatly trimmed lawn. It was the kind of place people visited reluctantly, dreading the emotions that awaited them within its walls. As she walked up the steps, she noticed how eerily quiet it was. There were no cars parked outside, no sounds of conversation drifting through the windows. It was as if the entire world had paused, holding its breath alongside her. Mr. Harris led her inside, guiding her toward a room at the end of the hallway. The air smelled faintly of flowers and polish, a strange mix that did little to mask the underlying sadness permeating the space. He opened the door slowly, revealing a dimly lit chamber dominated by a polished wooden casket resting on a raised platform. Candles flickered softly in the corners, casting shadows across the walls. "This is where we've prepared her," Mr. Harris said gently. "Take your time. I'll be right outside if you need anything." Maya nodded, unable to speak. Her legs felt like lead as she approached the coffin. each step heavier than the last. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Part of her wanted to run away, to pretend none of this was real. Another part desperately needed to see her mother one last time, to say the things she hadn't been able to say over the phone or in texts these past few months. As she drew closer, something about the scene struck her as odd. The room was too still, too perfect. Even the flowers arranged around the casket seemed artificial, their vibrant colors unnaturally bright. And then there was the coffin itself, closed, sealed tight. Why hadn't they left it open? Wasn't that customary? Or had something happened that they weren't telling her? Her fingers brushed against the smooth surface of the wood, sending a shiver down her spine. Taking a deep breath, she turned to Mr. Harris, who lingered near the doorway. "Can you open it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, his brow furrowing slightly. "Of course," he said finally, moving forward. With deliberate care. He unlatched the lid and began to lift it. Maya braced herself, steeling her nerves for the sight of her mother's peaceful face. But as the coffin opened fully, her breath caught in her throat. What lay inside wasn't Eleanor. For a moment Maya thought she might faint. Her knees buckled beneath her and she grabbed onto the edge of the casket for support. The body inside belonged to someone else entirely. A woman with sharp features, dark hair streaked with silver, and hands folded neatly across her chest. This wasn't her mother, not even close. What is this?" Maya stammered, turning to Mr. Harris. Her voice rose, panic creeping into her tone. "Where's my mom?" Mr. Harris looked equally shocked, his eyes widening as he leaned over to inspect the body. This can't be right," he muttered under his breath. "According to the hospital records, this is Eleanor Carter." "No, it isn't," Maya snapped, tears welling up in her eyes. "That's not my mother. Who is she? What's going on here?" The room spun around her as confusion and anger bubbled to the surface. All she wanted was to see her mother one last time, to hold on to some semblance of closure. Instead, she was faced with a stranger, a mystery wrapped in silk lining and polished wood. Something was terribly wrong, and Maya knew she wouldn't rest until she uncovered the truth. The air in the small candlelit room grew thick with tension. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the unfamiliar face inside the coffin. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. This wasn't her mother. This wasn't Eleanor. The woman lying there had sharp cheekbones, dark hair streaked with silver, and a peaceful expression that felt alien, almost staged. Everything about her seemed wrong. The way her hands were folded neatly across her chest, the faint trace of makeup on her pale skin, even the simple gold chain around her neck. None of it matched the image of Eleanor that Maya carried in her. "Hart, who is this?" Maya demanded again. Her voice rising sharply, she turned to Mr. Harris, who stood frozen near the doorway, his face pale and uneasy. His earlier calm demeanor had vanished, replaced by an unmistakable look of confusion, and perhaps fear. I don't understand," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer to the coffin, leaning over to examine the body more carefully. "The hospital sent us the records. They said this was your mother, Eleanor Carter." Maya shook her head violently, tears streaming down her cheeks now. "That's not my mom," she cried, pointing at the stranger in the casket. "Look at her. Look at her face. My mom has a scar above her left eyebrow from when she fell off a ladder years ago. And her hair? It's lighter than this. She doesn't wear jewelry like that." Every detail poured out of her in a rush, as if listing them would somehow prove her point and bring clarity to the chaos swirling around her. Mr. Harris straightened up, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. For the first time since Maya had known him, he looked flustered, unsure of himself. "Miss Carter, I assure you we followed protocol," he said, though his words lacked conviction. "We received confirmation from the hospital that this body belonged to Eleanor Carter. There must be some kind of mistake." "A mistake?" Maya interrupted, her voice trembling with anger. "You're telling me someone just mixed up bodies? How does that even happen?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced toward the door as if expecting someone, or something, to walk in and explain everything. When no one came, he sighed deeply and adjusted his glasses. "Let me call the hospital," he said finally. "They'll need to clarify this immediately." As Mr. Harris stepped out of the room to make the call, Maya sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the weight of the situation. Her thoughts spiraled wildly. If this wasn't her mother, then where was Eleanor? Was she still alive somewhere? Or worse, had something unthinkable happened to her? The questions gnawed at her relentlessly, each one more terrifying than the last. A few minutes later, Mr. Harris returned, his expression grim. "The hospital confirmed they released the correct body," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "They assured me the paperwork matches your mother's name and identification details." "But it's not her," Maya insisted, standing abruptly. Her frustration boiled over and she gestured wildly toward the coffin. "Doesn't anyone see how impossible this is? That's not Eleanor. So whose body is it?" At that moment, another figure entered the room, a middle-aged woman, wearing a crisp suit and holding a clipboard. She introduced herself as Ms. Reynolds, the hospital administrator. Her presence was professional but distant, as if she were used to handling delicate situations like this. After exchanging a few quiet words with Mr. Harris, she turned to Maya, with a practiced smile. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Miss Carter," Ms. Reynolds began, her tone smooth and rehearsed. "I understand this must be incredibly difficult for you. However, let me assure you that all procedures were followed correctly. We identified the deceased as Eleanor Carter based on standard protocols." Maya crossed her arms tightly over her chest, glaring at the woman. "Protocols? What protocols? Did you actually check her face? Did anyone compare her to a photo or verify her identity properly?" Ms. Reynolds hesitated, her smile faltering slightly. "Identification is typically done using documentation provided by the family and cross-referenced with our records," she explained. "In cases like this, visual identification isn't always required unless specifically requested." "So, you didn't even look at her?" Maya asked incredulously. "You just assumed it was her because of some papers?" "It's highly unusual for errors to occur," Ms. Reynolds replied, her tone defensive now. "Our system is designed to prevent mistakes like this, but if there's any doubt, we can arrange for further investigation." Maya felt a surge of anger bubbling inside her. "Highly unusual? Well, guess what? It's happening right now." She took a step closer to the coffin, studying the stranger's face again. Despite the unsettling nature of the discovery, she couldn't help but feel a strange curiosity. Who was this woman? Why had her body been mistaken for Eleanor's? And most importantly, where was her real mother? Her gaze lingered on the gold chain around the woman's neck. It was delicate, almost fragile-looking, with a small pendant shaped like a crescent moon. Something about it tugged at the edges of her memory, though she couldn't quite place why. Carefully, she reached out and touched it, feeling its cool metal beneath her fingertips. As she did, a wave of unease washed over her. This wasn't just a random piece of jewelry, it meant something. To someone. "What about her belongings?" Maya asked suddenly, turning back to Ms. Reynolds. "Did the hospital send anything with her? Clothes, personal items, anything at all?" Ms. Reynolds flipped through the pages on her clipboard before nodding. "There was a bag of personal effects," she admitted. "It should have been delivered here along with the body." Without waiting for permission, Maya strode past the two adults and headed toward the front desk, where a young assistant sat typing on a computer. "Excuse me," Maya said firmly. "Can you check if there's a bag of belongings for Eleanor Carter?" The assistant nodded and disappeared into a back room, returning moments later with a clear plastic bag containing a few items: a wallet, a set of keys, a crumpled tissue, and a small notebook. Maya snatched the bag and rifled through it eagerly. The wallet held a driver's license, but the photo on it clearly didn't match the woman in the coffin. The name printed on the card read Lila Harper. Maya held up the license, waving it in front of Ms. Reynolds and Mr. Harris. "See? This isn't my mom. This is someone else entirely. Lila Harper. Both adults exchanged worried glances, their faces etched with growing concern. This changes things, Ms. Reynolds murmured, pulling out her phone. I'll need to contact the authorities immediately. If there's been a mix-up, we need to get to the bottom of it. While Ms. Reynolds made her calls, Maya sat down, again her mind racing. Who was Lila Harper? And why had her body been sent to the funeral home instead of Eleanor's? More importantly, where was her mother? Was she lying in another morgue somewhere, misidentified and forgotten? Or had something far darker occurred? As the reality of the situation settled in, Maya realized she couldn't rely on others to find answers. She needed to take matters into her own hands. Whatever had happened to her mother, she vowed to uncover the truth, even if it meant unraveling secrets buried deep within the town she thought she knew so well. The next morning, Maya sat at the small kitchen table in her childhood home, staring blankly at the stack of papers spread out before her. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the room, but she barely noticed. Her mind was consumed by questions that gnawed at her relentlessly, keeping her awake most of the night. Who was Lila Harper? Why had her body been mistaken for Eleanor's? And above all, where was her mother? Ms. Reynolds and Mr. Harris had promised to investigate further, but Maya knew better than to sit around waiting for answers. Something about their reactions, the way they exchanged nervous glances, the hesitations in their voices, told her they weren't telling her everything. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a simple mix-up. There was something deeper, darker lurking beneath the surface. Her first stop was the hospital where her mother had supposedly passed away. It was a sprawling brick building surrounded by neatly trimmed hedges and towering oak trees. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a comforting place, a symbol of healing and care. But to Maya, it now felt cold and menacing, its bright facade hiding secrets she couldn't yet see. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity, nurses rushing down hallways, patients shuffling toward elevators, families gathered anxiously in waiting areas. Maya approached the reception desk, clutching the plastic bag containing Lila Harper's belongings. The young woman behind the counter greeted her with a polite smile. "I'm looking for information about my mother," Maya said, forcing herself to sound calm despite the storm raging inside her. "Eleanor Carter. She was admitted here last week." The receptionist typed something into her computer, frowning slightly as she scanned the screen. "I'm sorry, I don't have access to patient records," she replied. "You'll need to speak to someone from administration." Maya sighed, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. She followed the signs pointing toward the administrative offices, weaving through crowded corridors until she reached a quiet wing of the hospital. There, she found Ms. Reynolds sitting behind a polished mahogany desk, typing furiously on her laptop. When she saw Maya, her expression shifted from mild surprise to guarded concern. "Miss Carter," she said, standing up and gesturing for Maya to take a seat. "What brings you here?" "I want answers," Maya said bluntly, placing the plastic bag on the desk. "This belongs to Lila Harper, not my mother. How did this happen, and where is Eleanor?" Ms. Reynolds hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "We're still investigating," she said carefully. "These kinds of errors are extremely rare, but when they do occur, we take them very seriously." "That's not good enough," Maya shot back, leaning forward. "You sent me the wrong body. You told me my mother was dead, but she's not in that coffin. So where is she?" Ms. Reynolds adjusted her glasses, clearly uncomfortable under Maya's intense gaze. "We're doing everything we can to locate her," she assured her. "But, in the meantime, perhaps you'd like to review our records. Sometimes families can provide additional details that help clarify discrepancies." Though reluctant, Maya agreed to look over the documents. As she flipped through the pages, one thing stood out. The signature on the discharge form didn't match her mother's handwriting. It was sloppy, almost rushed, as if someone had forged it in haste. Her heart pounded as she pointed it out. "To Ms. Reynolds." "This isn't my mom's signature," Maya said firmly. "Who signed this?" Ms. Reynolds glanced at the document, her brow furrowing. "I'll need to check with the staff who handled the case." she murmured, picking up the phone. After a brief conversation, she turned back to Maya. It seems there may have been an oversight during the processing stage. We'll need to conduct a full audit of the records. An oversight? Maya clenched her fists beneath the table, trying to keep her composure. This wasn't negligence, it was something far more deliberate. Determined to dig deeper, she decided to visit the archives department, hoping to find clues hidden in old files. The archivist, a kind-faced older man named Mr. Peterson, welcomed her warmly. He listened patiently as Maya explained her situation, nodding sympathetically. "Mistakes like this shouldn't happen," he said, shaking his head. "But sometimes, well, things get complicated." He led her to a dusty corner of the archive room where rows of filing cabinets lined the walls. Together, they sifted through decades' worth of records, searching for anything related to Eleanor or Lila Harper. Hours passed, and just as Maya began to lose hope, Mr. Peterson pulled out a faded folder labeled Unresolved Cases 1985. Inside, Maya found a newspaper clipping detailing a chilling story from 30 years ago. A grieving daughter had discovered her father's body missing after a funeral, replaced by an unidentified corpse. The article mentioned allegations of misconduct within the hospital, though no concrete evidence had ever surfaced. At the bottom of the page was a quote from a former nurse claiming that bodies were swapped to cover up mistakes. Maya's blood ran cold. Could history be repeating itself? Had her mother fallen victim to the same sinister practice? She thanked Mr. Peterson and hurried home, her mind racing with possibilities. That evening, unable to sleep, she scoured online forums and local news websites for similar stories. What she uncovered shocked her even further. Over the years, several families in the area had reported discrepancies involving loved ones' bodies being misidentified, or worse, disappearing entirely. Many of these cases had gone uninvestigated, brushed aside as isolated incidents or dismissed due to lack of evidence. One name kept popping up in connection with these reports: Dr. Robert Langley, a former chief surgeon at the hospital. According to rumors, Langley had overseen numerous high-profile surgeries before abruptly retiring 2 decades ago. Some claimed he had been involved in unethical practices, including falsifying death certificates and tampering with medical records. Though no charges were ever filed, his reputation remained tarnished. Determined to learn more, Maya tracked down a retired nurse named Margaret Dawson, who had worked closely with Langley during his tenure. Margaret lived in a modest house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by flower gardens and chirping birds. When Maya knocked on her door, the elderly woman greeted her with a warm smile, but grew somber as soon as she heard the reason for the visit. "I've been expecting someone to come knocking sooner or later," Margaret said, inviting Maya inside. Over cups of tea, she recounted tales of suspicious deaths, altered documents, and whispered warnings among the staff. "Dr. Langley wasn't a bad man," she admitted softly, "but he made choices that hurt people, and those choices had consequences." Margaret's words confirmed Maya's worst fears. This wasn't just a mix-up, it was part of a larger, sinister pattern. Someone within the hospital had deliberately covered up Eleanor's fate, using Lila Harper's body as a decoy. But why? And how far would they go to protect their secret? As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Maya resolved to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Her mother was out there somewhere, alive or otherwise, and she wouldn't rest until she found her. By the time Maya left Margaret Dawson's house, the weight of the truth pressed heavily on her shoulders. The retired nurse's stories had painted a grim picture of the hospital's past, a place where mistakes were buried deeper than bodies, where power and secrecy intertwined to protect reputations at any cost. But what chilled Maya most was Margaret's final warning. "If you're digging into this, be careful. Some secrets are dangerous enough to kill for." Despite the fear gnawing at her insides, Maya felt a surge of determination. Her mother was out there, alive or otherwise, and she wouldn't stop until she found her. Armed with Margaret's insights and the scraps of information she'd gathered so far, Maya began piecing together the puzzle. She knew she couldn't do it alone, though. This wasn't just about her family anymore. It was about exposing a conspiracy that had likely harmed countless others. Her first ally came unexpectedly in the form of Daniel Harper, Lila Harper's estranged son. After finding contact details in the wallet discovered with Lila's body, Maya reached out to him. At first, Daniel was hesitant, his voice wary over the phone. "Why are you calling me?" he asked bluntly. "I haven't seen my mom in years. What does this have to do with me?" Maya explained everything: the mix-up at the funeral home, the discrepancies in the records, and the disturbing history of the hospital. To her relief, Daniel agreed to meet her the next day at a quiet cafe downtown. When they finally sat across from each other, Maya could see the pain etched into his face. He looked tired, as if carrying a burden too heavy to bear. "I thought she was gone," Daniel admitted quietly, stirring sugar into his coffee. "She disappeared months ago. I figured she'd run off again. It's what she always did when things got tough, but now you're telling me she's dead? And someone used her body to cover up another crime?" Maya nodded solemnly. "It's not just your mom, Daniel. My mother is missing too. Whoever did this, they're playing games with people's lives. We need to figure out why." Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "This sounds insane," he muttered, "but I believe you. If we can find answers, maybe we can get justice for both our moms." With Daniel on board, Maya decided to reach out to someone else who might help. Sarah Bennett, a local journalist known for her investigative reporting. Sarah had covered several controversial stories over the years, including allegations of corruption within the hospital system. Though skeptical at first, Sarah agreed to hear them out after Maya shared her findings. "This is big," Sarah said, flipping through the documents Maya had brought. "If even half of what you're saying is true, it could blow the lid off. Decades of wrongdoing. But we'll need hard proof, not just rumors and old newspaper clippings." Over the next few days, the trio worked tirelessly, pooling their resources and skills. Maya scoured public records, searching for connections between the hospital and the families affected by similar cases. Daniel used his tech-savvy background to hack into outdated databases, uncovering fragments of information that hinted at a larger operation. Meanwhile, Sarah interviewed former hospital employees, coaxing them into sharing long-buried secrets. One name kept surfacing repeatedly: Dr. Robert Langley. Though retired, he remained a shadowy figure looming over the entire scandal. According to one source, Langley had established a network of loyal staff members who helped him manipulate records and dispose of evidence. Another claimed that certain patients who died under mysterious circumstances were replaced with unidentified bodies to avoid scrutiny. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that the hospital wasn't merely covering up individual mistakes. It was part of an organized effort to protect its reputation at all costs. Bodies were swapped, names were erased, and grieving families were left in the dark, their loved ones relegated to forgotten files and unmarked graves. But the breakthrough came when Sarah stumbled upon a key piece of evidence: a ledger hidden deep within the hospital's archives. It listed names, dates, and cryptic notes detailing the fates of those involved in the scheme. Among the entries was Eleanor Carter's name, but instead of being marked deceased, it read transfer pending. Beside it was a location code that matched an address outside town. Maya's heart raced as she stared at the page. Transfer pending meant her mother might still be alive. But where had she been taken, and why? Sarah traced the location code to an abandoned medical facility nestled in the woods on the outskirts of town. Known locally as the Hillcrest Center, it had once served as a rehabilitation clinic before shutting down due to lack of funding. Now it stood empty, or so everyone believed. Convinced they were onto something, Maya, Daniel, and Sarah devised a plan to investigate the site. They knew going in blind was risky, but they didn't have time to wait for official channels. Every moment counted if Eleanor was still alive. That night, armed with flashlights and cameras, the three crept toward the facility under the cover of darkness. The building loomed ahead, its windows shattered and walls covered in ivy. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, rusted and sagging in places. Slipping through a gap in the fence, they moved cautiously, their footsteps crunching softly against the gravel path. Inside, the air smelled damp and stale, laced with the faint metallic tang of blood. Flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows across the hallways, illuminating peeling wallpaper and discarded medical equipment. As they explored, they found signs of recent activity: fresh tire tracks in the dirt, scattered papers bearing the hospital's logo, and locked doors that suggested restricted areas. In one room, they discovered a chilling sight: rows of metal, shelves stacked with labeled containers. Each bore a name and date, some familiar from their research. It was a makeshift morgue, hidden away from prying eyes. Among the containers, Maya spotted one labeled Carter, Eleanor. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached out to touch it, tears streaming down her face. "She's here," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "They brought her here." Before they could examine further, a sound echoed through the corridor, a low hum followed by distant voices. Someone else was inside the facility. Panicked, the group quickly retreated, snapping photos and gathering whatever evidence they could before slipping back into the night. As they drove away, Maya clutched the camera tightly, her mind racing. They had found proof, not just of Eleanor's fate, but of the sinister operation that had torn apart countless lives. Now it was time to expose the truth and bring those responsible to justice. For her mother, for Lila Harper, and for every family who had suffered in silence, Maya vowed to fight until the bitter end. The drive back from Hillcrest Center was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Maya sat in the passenger seat, clutching the camera tightly as Sarah navigated the winding forest road. Daniel, riding shotgun in the back, kept glancing nervously over his shoulder, half expecting headlights to appear behind them at any moment. The hum of the car's engine did little to drown out the questions racing through their minds. Who had been inside the facility? What were they doing there? And how long before someone realized they'd been discovered? "We need to move fast," Sarah said finally, breaking the tense silence. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "If whoever's running this place finds out we were snooping around, they'll do whatever it takes to cover their tracks, and that includes silencing us." Maya nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She stared at the photos on the camera screen, each image more damning than the last. Rows of labeled containers, medical equipment still bearing traces of recent use, and documents scattered across desks, all evidence pointing to a sinister operation hidden within the abandoned building. But what struck her hardest was the container marked with her mother's name. It wasn't just proof of Eleanor's fate. It was a lifeline, a sign that she might still be alive. "What do we do now?" Daniel asked, leaning forward between the front seats. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the anxiety he was trying so hard to hide. "We can't exactly walk into a police station and say, 'Hey, we broke into an illegal medical facility.' They'd arrest us before we could finish explaining." Sarah glanced at him in the rearview mirror, her expression thoughtful. "We don't go straight to the cops, not yet. First, we gather everything we've got: photos, documents, witness statements. Then we take it to someone who has the power to act without tipping off the wrong people." "Like who?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "A trusted journalist," Sarah replied firmly. "Someone with connections and credibility. Someone who can make sure this story gets out no matter what happens to us." Over the next few days, the trio worked tirelessly to compile their findings. Maya pored over every photo and document they'd collected, piecing together a timeline of events that painted a horrifying picture. Patients like Eleanor and Lila Harper hadn't just disappeared. They had become pawns in a larger game, used to conceal mistakes and protect reputations. Meanwhile, Daniel hacked into obscure databases, uncovering financial records that linked key figures within the hospital to Hillcrest Center. Payments, transfers, and coded messages hinted at a network far more extensive than they'd initially imagined. Sarah, meanwhile, reached out to her contacts in the media world. She knew better than to trust just anyone. This kind of story required discretion and determination. After several tense phone calls, she secured a meeting with Rachel Myers, a veteran investigative reporter known for exposing corruption at the highest levels. Rachel agreed to meet them at a secluded cabin outside town, away from prying eyes. When they arrived, Rachel greeted them with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through them. As they laid out their evidence on the wooden table, her expression shifted from doubt to disbelief, and then to anger. "This is monstrous," Rachel muttered, flipping through the photos and documents. "If even half of this is true, it's one of the biggest scandals I've ever seen. But proving it won't be easy. People like this, they have resources, influence, and lawyers who will tear you apart if you give them the chance." "That's why we need your help," Maya said earnestly, leaning forward. "You're the only one who can make sure this gets out. If we go public the wrong way, they'll bury us, and my mom might never come home." Rachel studied her for a moment, her gaze softening slightly. "All right," she said finally. "I'll run with this, but you need to stay safe. These people won't hesitate to hurt you if they think you're a threat." With Rachel on board, the group felt a flicker of hope, but also a growing sense of urgency. Every second counted, especially for Eleanor. Using Rachel's connections, they arranged for a team of private investigators to stake out Hillcrest Center while they prepared to release the story. At the same time, Maya insisted on returning to the facility herself, desperate to find her mother. "I can't wait anymore," she told Sarah and Daniel when they tried to dissuade her. "Every minute we waste is another minute she could be suffering or worse. I'm going back with or without you." Reluctantly, they agreed to accompany her. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and a small recording device, they returned to Hillcrest under the cover of darkness. This time, they approached cautiously, sticking to the shadows and avoiding the main entrance. Instead, they slipped through a side door leading to the basement where they hoped to find answers without alerting anyone inside. The lower level was colder and darker than the upper floors, its narrow corridors lined with rusted pipes and exposed wiring. The air smelled faintly of chemicals, making Maya's stomach churn. As they moved deeper into the building, they began hearing faint sounds, muffled voices, footsteps echoing in the distance, and the occasional clang of metal against metal. Whoever was here, they weren't alone. Finally, they reached a heavy steel door at the end of a hallway. A small window set into the door revealed a dimly lit room beyond. Peering inside, Maya froze. There, lying on a gurney in the center of the room, was Eleanor. Her face was pale, her body frail, but she was unmistakably alive. "Oh my God," Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face. She pushed open the door, rushing to her mother's side. Eleanor stirred weakly, her eyelids fluttering as she tried to focus on the figure standing above her. Maya, she murmured, her voice hoarse and barely audible. "It's me, Mom," Maya choked out, gripping her hand tightly. "I'm here. We're getting you out." But their reunion was short-lived. Footsteps echoed closer, accompanied by the sound of raised voices. Someone was coming, and they weren't far away. "Quick, help me get her up," Daniel hissed, moving to support Eleanor's other side. Together they lifted her gently, guiding her toward the exit as quickly as they could. Behind them, the door burst open, revealing two men in scrubs. One shouted something unintelligible, while the other lunged forward, trying to grab hold of Eleanor. Thinking fast, Sarah hurled a nearby chair at the men, forcing them to stumble backward. "Go! Go!" she yelled, ushering Maya and Daniel down the corridor. They ran, hearts pounding, dragging Eleanor along with them. The journey back through the labyrinthine halls felt endless, every shadow threatening to reveal another pursuer. Finally, they emerged into the cool night air, collapsing onto the damp grass as Sarah slammed the car door shut behind them. As they sped away, Maya cradled her mother in her arms, whispering reassurances even as tears streamed down her cheeks. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel a sliver of relief. They had found Eleanor, but the fight was far from over. The car sped down the deserted road, its headlights cutting through the thick darkness of the forest. Maya sat in the back seat, holding her mother tightly, whispering words of comfort as Eleanor drifted in and out of consciousness, though frail and weak. Eleanor managed a faint smile, her hand trembling as she reached up to touch Maya's cheek. It was a moment Maya thought she'd never have again. A second chance to hold her mother, to tell her how much she loved her, to fight for her life. But the relief was fleeting. They weren't safe yet. The men at Hillcrest Center had seen them. They knew they were onto something. And if there was one thing Maya had learned over the past few days, it was that the people behind this conspiracy wouldn't stop until they silenced anyone who threatened to expose them. "We need to get Eleanor to a hospital," Sarah said, from the driver's seat, glancing nervously at the rearview mirror. "She's in bad shape." Maya nodded, brushing strands of hair away from her mother's face. "Mom, can you hear me? We're going to take care of you. Just hang on." Eleanor murmured something unintelligible, her eyelids fluttering shut again. Her breathing was shallow but steady, a small sign of hope in an otherwise terrifying situation. Daniel, sitting beside Sarah, kept turning around to check on them, his expression tense. "We should call Rachel," he suggested. "If those guys are following us, we'll need backup." Sarah hesitated before nodding. "You're right, but we can't risk stopping, not yet." Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed Rachel's number, explaining their situation in hushed tones. On the other end, Rachel wasted no time. "I'll alert my contacts and send someone to meet you at the hospital," she promised. "In the meantime, keep moving. Don't trust anyone except me." As they approached the outskirts of town, the tension in the car grew almost unbearable. Every passing vehicle made Maya's heart race. Was it just another late-night traveler? Or were they being followed? She clutched her mother closer as if shielding her from whatever might come next. When they finally arrived at the emergency room, Sarah parked hastily and rushed inside to flag down a nurse. Within minutes, a team of doctors and paramedics wheeled Eleanor away on a stretcher, leaving Maya standing in stunned silence. "Adieu." The first time since this nightmare began, she felt utterly powerless. All she could do now was wait and pray. Hours later, Maya sat in the hospital waiting room, staring blankly at the wall. The adrenaline that had fueled her for days was beginning to wear off, replaced by exhaustion and fear. Daniel brought her a cup of coffee, which she accepted with a quiet thank you. Sarah paced nearby, talking urgently into her phone with Rachel, updating her on Eleanor's condition. "She's stable," Sarah said, finally hanging up. "They're running tests, but the doctor says she should pull through." Maya exhaled sharply, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank God," she whispered, clutching the locket around her neck, the same one Eleanor had given her years ago. It felt like a lifeline, connecting her to everything she'd fought so hard to protect. Rachel arrived not long after, accompanied by two men in suits. One introduced himself as Agent Harris, a federal investigator specializing in healthcare fraud. The other was Detective Ramirez, a local law enforcement officer known for tackling corruption cases. Both looked grim as Rachel handed over the evidence Maya, Sarah, and Daniel had collected. "This is enough to launch a full-scale investigation," Agent Harris said, flipping through the documents. "We've suspected something like this for years, but we've never had concrete proof. Until now." Detective Ramirez nodded, his jaw tight. "If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond negligence. This is criminal activity on a massive scale. People will answer for this." Over the next several days, the story broke wide open. Rachel's exposé hit newsstands and websites across the country, detailing the decades-long conspiracy at the hospital and Hillcrest Center. Photos of the hidden morgue, financial records linking key figures to illegal activities, and testimonies from former staff members painted a damning picture. Public outrage spread quickly, prompting calls for accountability and reform. Meanwhile, authorities launched raids on both the hospital and Hillcrest Center, uncovering even more evidence of wrongdoing. Dozens of patients' families came forward, sharing stories eerily similar to Maya's. Some had spent years searching for answers. Others had simply given up, believing their loved ones were gone forever. Thanks to Maya's bravery, they finally had closure and justice. For Maya, the hardest part was watching her mother recover. Eleanor's body had been weakened by weeks of neglect, and the emotional toll of her ordeal lingered. But slowly, with Maya by her side, she began to heal. Their bond, already unbreakable, grew stronger through shared trauma and triumph. One evening, as they sat together in Eleanor's hospital room, Maya held her mother's hand and smiled. "You're going to be okay, Mom," she said softly. "We're going to get through this. Together." Eleanor squeezed her hand weakly, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I'm so proud of you, Maya," she whispered. "You didn't give up on me. You didn't give up on the truth." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya allowed herself to feel a sense of peace. The fight wasn't over. There would be trials, investigations, and battles ahead, but she had done what mattered most. She had saved her mother and uncovered a dark chapter that needed to see the light. As she stepped out of the hospital that night, Maya looked up at the stars, feeling a quiet resolve settle over her. She vowed to honor her mother's strength by continuing to fight, not just for their family, but for everyone who had suffered because of the secrets buried beneath lies. The coffin that once held a stranger now stood empty, a symbol of the horrors Maya had uncovered and overcome. And though scars would remain, so too would the love, courage, and resilience that had carried her through.